Hello friends! I don't know that I've ever filmed from this angle of my room before, but this is where all my books currently are. I'm getting them all stacked up and organized to film my everything I read this year video, so I thought instead of trying to set up some nice looking scene and taking the books with me, I would just come to where the books are. This is the 2021 reading survey. I wrote down the questions a couple weeks ago and we're going to answer them. As always, I will link down below the blog where I originally got these questions. The first one being, what was the number of books? I didn't write out the question fully, I just wrote number, sign, books. Essentially, how many books did you read this year? And my answer is 181. I didn't think it would be that high, but I counted them last night. I've been counting them for the last couple weeks and I get a different number every time. If I go on my Goodreads, if I go on my Instagram photos, if I go on my wrap-ups on YouTube. But I think finally laying them all out, figuring out which ones were missing, which ones I still can't find, I have discovered 181 is the most accurate answer that I have for you. Next question is a number of pages. That is not a stat that I've added up, but it's always between 50,000 and 60,000. Pretty much, regardless of how many books I read. So we're gonna say 55,000, and you can find out the official number in my everything I read this year video. Listen, I know the point of the survey is to answer all the questions. Last year I didn't answer like any of the questions because I wanted to keep some things a secret and not spoil everything and whatever. This year I'm gonna lay it all out for you. That's just the one that I don't know. Top genre is next. So what genre did you read the most? And you could sum up mine as speculative because it encompasses like horror, fantasy, science fiction, magical realism, fabulism, anything in this world. So that's my answer. A lot of my top 10 for the year, I'm still figuring it out, but I think most of it is speculative. Or like at least half of it. If you want to guess what my top 10 is going to be down below, that would be really fun because usually I post an Instagram post where you can guess, but I'm not doing that this year because I've already kicked off my 6 days of 6 whatever. If you want to guess any of them, go ahead. Although I'm about to tell you 2 of them because the next question is, what was your favorite new release? Now we can start digging apart the piles. This one's easy. Oh no. It's right beside me. Don't fall over. My favorite new release that came out in 2021 that I read in 2021 is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. It's a girl obsessed with the slasher genre and decides that a slasher is happening in her town and she needs to participate in it. The next question is your favorite older title. So something that didn't come out this year that I read this year that is my top favorite. And it's gonna be all the way back in March. Do you know what it is? I bet you do. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. There's a couple books this year that like were kind of unexpected favorites or changed what I knew my reading taste to be, and this is one of them. I didn't know that I would love this so desperately, and I think all the time about how I can't believe I didn't read this earlier in my life, but it's about a weird house and it's confusing and just incredible. I'm not going to put that back. I'm going to keep it right here in case there's another question where that would be the answer. The next prompt wants me to tell you about a book that lived up to the hype. So I've said before that I just never feel like answering with a new release. Even though I get that it's a fine answer and you can answer anything you want, but I just feel like so many of these books haven't been out long enough to gain like actual hype. So many books just have hype right out the gate. But what I think I have to go with is something that I read because of the hype. So in January, I did a video where I read booktubers' favorites, and it was booktubers who have similar taste to me, and so I'll go grab something from January. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig is a funny one because it is exactly what I'm talking about. In the year that it came out, it got so much hype and everybody was talking about it. And because of that, so many other people read it this year. And now it doesn't have the same hype because there's so many people who absolutely hate this book. I thought it was fantastic, right up my alley. It's about a woman really going through it, having a hard time, depressed, and she gets to reimagine, relive out certain aspects of her life. And though it has less hype now, I would consider it something that lived up to the hype when I read it. Next up is, I'm assuming, one that didn't. Yes, didn't live up to the hype. Quite a few. I mean, it wasn't a good reading year for me. The first one that comes to mind, though, is one that, again, I read for a video, and I read it because of its hype. It was on a list of BuzzFeed's, like, top, I don't remember what it was, mystery thriller books that you have to read, or whatever it was. Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. To be fair, this is like a YA mystery, and for me, most YA mystery doesn't get super high ratings anyway. So this wasn't the most shocking thing, but it being on a list of some of like my favorite thrillers of all time, I thought it would probably be a win. I've had this recommended to me so many times, and I think I gave it like a 3. So it's fine, but I definitely wouldn't put it in my greatest list of all time. So that's that. Next up is a book that felt like the biggest accomplishment. I knew there would be a moment for this to come back around. This actually was not as difficult to read as I thought it would be once I really got into it and decided how I wanted to read it. This is a really ambitious book overall. I know that because it was part of my book club this year, I made a lot of people read it, and we were all in this struggle together. The amount of people just in history who have abandoned this book, or who, you know, spent 4 years reading it before completing it, I think I have to say that it feels like an accomplishment. Anybody who gets through this book knows that it just takes a lot of focus and time and attention. If you've never seen House of Leaves before, there are sections that you have to read like in a mirror. There are footnotes upon footnotes. There are moments when you're reading the book upside down. And beyond just the writing style, there's a lot of things that you're trying to just understand as you read. So that's my answer. Runners up, though, I would have to say XX, which has a kind of similar-ish vibe to it. And also, I want to say Dune. Sorry, the cover came off. Whew, it's such a tragedy. But these also felt like accomplishments just because of the genre that they're in and how you're just dropped into so much. They definitely felt like, oh my god, I finished it. Shout out to my eyes for doing that. Next up is your favorite character. I don't have the book with my favorite character in it because my mom has it. I need to pick that up. Someone remind me before I film my everything I read this year. But it is the characters in Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Ryland is an astronaut surviving in space, and there is another character that is just everybody's favorite this year and just like such a little cinnamon roll. So that's my number 1 answer. My number 2 answer is Jade from My Heart is a Chainsaw. I've been gushing about her for the last couple months, and I will continue in more videos, so I'm not going to get too into it. But I love her. I love her vibe. I loved being in her head, and it was a good time. Next question. Is your least favorite character? Oh, fun. I forgot this one was one of them. I'm gonna say the couple in A Touch of Jen, names I don't remember, Remy and Alicia. They are a couple obsessed with this woman on Instagram, and they pretend they're like with her or are her, and they're just the most uncomfortable couple that I have ever read, and intentionally so. Even though I get what the author was doing and I felt the way I feel like I was supposed to feel about them, I also just like detested the reading experience itself because of them. And I feel like I've said so many times before, I can like an unlikable character. I can still like a book with an unlikable character, but this was just too much for me. I actually read a lot of hyper irritating characters this year. Let me see if I can think of any others. I mean, obviously the villains in any book, like, I'm not going to enjoy, but I want to think of a character that I was supposed to like. Charlie. Charlie's decisions in Survive the Night by Riley Sager, I did not understand, could not get on board with, hated being in her head. Which is funny because I feel like she has some things in common with Jade from My Heart is a Chainsaw. This is really indicative of how you can put a lot of my favorite qualities into a character and it can end up going so right or so wrong. I feel like we all hated Charlie. So this isn't my most controversial opinion of the video. Next up, most shocking moment. I don't feel like I read that many mystery thrillers this year that truly caught me off guard and were so great. My favorite mystery thrillers of the year, actually, I don't love them because of their plot twists. I love them just because of their plot. So I'm actually thinking about some books that I gave kind of low ratings to, but the twist was good. Okay, number one, The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. I didn't love this story, but it's beautiful. It's also going to be the answer to a question in just a second. I didn't love this overall. I had some issues with it, but the twist was really good, really well done. I think some people saw it coming, but I really enjoyed it. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney is my objective answer. I understand this is a good twist. It didn't surprise me, but I recognize that it was a really surprising thing for a lot of people. So even though I gave this 3 stars, and I gave this 2, they're still books that I recommend to people, so they're ones that fit the question. The Last House on Needless Street is definitely a surprising one. I feel like even if you grasp what's going on, there's then a snowball effect of multiple other things going on. And though I gave this 3 stars as well, it was a wild little ride. And then this one got the highest rating from me, a 4-star, They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This is one of my most recommended mystery thrillers of all time. I think it's just a solid across the board and most people enjoy this. And if you haven't read this twist before, I think it'll catch you off guard and it's really fun. It even surprised me. So this had my most surprising moment. Next up is Best Writing. Such a subjective thing, and I actually don't think people are gonna agree with me just based on the reviews that I've seen come in for these books since reading them. But it's good because I feel like they are similar in some ways, that if you did enjoy one, this is my opportunity to recommend the other. So my answers are The Wild Ones by Nafisa Assad and Mrs. Death by Selena Godin. Both of these have a real world influence and references, but they are fantastical, ethereal in a way. The perspective in both of these are what make them my favorite too. So in The Wild Ones, you have a good portion of the book written in first person plural and this group of girls. And then in this one, we're following 2 different perspectives, one of them being death itself embodied, and it's a fascinating perspective to read from, and all the conversations that are had in here are done in a really lyrical way. The next one is the book that I push the most people to read. I think you really have to tell me this one. What book, if you could pick one or a couple this year that you picked up solely because of me, I don't know what that would be. Okay, I know this is a super popular book, obviously, but I do think because it was part of the book club that there was a large group of people that would have never picked this up if I hadn't selected it as a book club pick. And I know this had such mixed results, but I do think that this is the first thing that comes to mind for me. And the other one that comes to mind immediately is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. Not because this doesn't have a claim on its own or nobody is talking about this, but it, was a debut author and it didn't have a ton of initial hype throughout the year. Once it came out, there are a couple of us who have just been championing this for months and pushing everybody to read it. And I'm so happy for this author, and an audiobook, I just saw the announcement, is coming out next year, which is so exciting to see because I feel like so many of us are used to audiobooks being available immediately and forget that for a lot of authors that's not a thing. The book has to gain an audience and get an opportunity to have an audiobook. So it's very cool. Those are the ones that I initially thought of and I've seen myself tagged in the most, I feel like, this year, but I would love to hear your answer. If there is anything, that would be cool. Next up is your new favorite author. Okay, I read a lot of new authors for the first time this year. I read a lot of authors for the first time this year, and a lot of them that I have on my radar that I want to pick up their next thing, or I need to go back and read some of their backlist. June apparently was a good month for that because that's the month that I read C.L. Polk for the first time. Definitely want to give more a try. Also, Eden Robinson came into my life that month. I already have more of her stuff on my shelf. And then I also have Rachel Eve Moulton. I won't know for sure if these were like one-hit wonders until I read more, so that's partially why I want to read them. Because honestly, a lot of times I will think an author is going to be a new favorite. I pick up something, I give it 5 stars, and I think that's just going to be true forever. And then, like we learned a couple times this year, sometimes their subsequent book becomes my least favorite thing I've ever read. Mark Z. Danielewski. Also, The Wild Ones was my first time with Nafisa Assad, so I think I will pick up more from her. And LaTanya McQueen is someone that I want to keep my eye on and see what else she comes out with, because this was an extremely well done novel, When the Reckoning Comes. I'm sure I have a lot of other horror answers, but that's what I'm going to stick with for now. Next question is a book that I will rec the most. As far as mystery thriller books go, my answer is still They Never Learn. I think that this is a good entry point for a lot of people in the genre, but I also think that people well-versed can also love it. So this is my fiction answer. And then I definitely have a nonfiction answer. Throwing it back to January 2021, I read 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act. This is by Bob Joseph, and it's called Helping Canadians Make Reconciliation with Indigenous Peoples a Reality. So like, obviously it is intended for Canadians, but I think anybody could benefit from this idea of reconciliation, the relationship with Indigenous peoples, and also just like people who should understand Canadian history better and not the kind that would typically be in a textbook, perhaps. It's extremely well written, well researched, personal anecdotes and experiences obviously in here. And yeah, I've recommended this to many people this year. Next up, we've got favorite cover. I've already showed these books. I read 181 books this year, and yet I'm continually pulling up the same ones because this is just so beautiful. I feel like faces on covers are something that I used to hate because it was photographs. And then I hated when it was just like really simple illustration. But this just beautiful, stylized human being with like, you know, it's got all of the colors and the waves. You can see all the organic movement. I love these covers so much. And they both have the word ones in the title. I don't know why that matters. Next up is a book that made you cry. Don't mind me while I pull up a book I've already talked about. Yes, a book about a weird house made me cry. How? No idea. I was so emotionally invested in this book that I cried. There was a little shocking moment, and then I was a mess for a couple pages. My other answer is weirdly a reread, and when I selected Ugly Love for this video where I was rereading questionable favorites, I thought there was no way it was going to have the same impact just overall, but I definitely wouldn't have guessed it would have the same emotional impact, but it did. I still cried at the end of this. It still caught me off guard somehow, and it was really a perfect reread for me. I know that the next question is a book that made you laugh, and I usually don't have an answer because I feel like I don't read happy books. But this year I have an answer, and it's another reread. I'm not going to grab all the books, but I reread the Georgia Nicholson series, the entirety of it for the first time in over 10 years, and it was such a fun time. It was everything I remember. It was stupid, some of it was questionable, and I was laughing along, and it was just exactly what I needed halfway through the year. Oh, next one is favorite reread. Whoops. This year I did the most rereading I've ever done. It's funny because my reading year has been a flop for the most part. I just keep picking up things and hating them, and I keep getting recommended to reread books. Everyone has been telling me, when your reading sucks, just go back and reread your favorites. And I've been reading so many of my favorites over again, and a lot of them are not holding up for me. So the ones that have, right here, Georgia Nicholson, Ugly Love, obviously. I reread The Raven Cycle every year. This always holds up no matter what. And then my most surprising was probably The Undomestic Goddess, because I haven't read this since I was probably 17, and I thought there was no way it was gonna hold up, and it remains one of my favorite and only favorite like adult romances. I said in the video that I reread this that like this isn't something I would ever pick up if I read this synopsis as a 2021 release. Like, I'm not picking it up, but because it's had a special place in my heart since I was a teen, Sophie Kinsella remains like a favorite. And the last question is your most unexpected 5-star or biggest surprise. I think everyone probably knows the answer to this. If you've watched my content, for me it wasn't a surprise that I enjoyed Dune, but I think for the internet as a whole, this is a shocking revelation that I could enjoy, and it is the biggest surprising 5-star. Like, I thought I would like it, but I didn't think it would be one of my all-time favorite books. And now it's making me question like all of my mom's favorite sci-fi and high fantasy and books that I would never pick up. Should I read those too? Because we have more in common than I ever even thought. Dune is incredible. It's a little bit, I don't want to say life-changing, but reading life-changing. It altered my perception of myself and my reading. And that's the best thing that a book can do. And I'm lucky to have had that happen in 2021 with all of the flops going on. So that is the 2021 reading survey. I'll put everything down below. It's the same questions every year. I see people every year at the end of the year scrambling to find a survey or a questionnaire that's similar to like the mid-year freakout tag. And this one I feel like has a lot of similar questions. So hopefully if you have included all of your end of year content, you're still looking for something like this, it will give you a list of things to answer. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you, you know when, tomorrow.